Brian Enton was in the courtroom today. Brian, was that testimony about this hair of Lori's on the duct tape as dramatic as it sounds like it was?
It certainly was, Elizabeth. You know, we've heard so much circumstantial evidence over the last but we hadn't heard anything like what we heard today.
Hello from a rainy Napa in California, and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. It's taken 4 weeks for the prosecution to reveal their hand, and today, on trial day 15, that card was finally played. Not only was a hair found on the sticky duct tape used to bind and secure poor little 7-year-old JJ's body, but that hair, the DNA was apparently matched to the doomsday mom herself, Lori Vallow. And as it happens, Lori, once upon a time, prior to her days as a cult figure, prior to her days as a goddess, Lori was a hairdresser. And there seems to be something poetic, something just desserts about this whole thing, that something as flimsy as one of her own hairs might be the best and worst evidence against her in this case. The only caveat to what looks, on paper at least, to be smoking gun evidence is in the word partial match. The DNA wasn't a complete sample. There were a few alleles that were missing. And in that little area of uncertainty, the defense will likely make their play that there is reasonable doubt in this case. Well, is there? Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Bear in mind, I'm in America traveling around. It takes quite a lot to travel and sort of research the trial and make a video and edit it and upload it. So if you're enjoying this episode, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. So I want to talk a little bit about déjà vu. You know, when I was in court last week, I noticed the officer testifying about uncovering JJ's grave. It was Detective Daniels, if memory serves, who made an offhand remark that duct tape is a remarkably good source for all sorts of evidence. Hair, fibers, touch DNA, etc. And that was on April 26th that he made that comment. He said basically that duct tape often has really good evidence on it. And it seemed like that wasn't just a chance remark. He was sowing a seed for something. And well, here we are. It did create kind of an archive for perhaps one of the most important and significant pieces of evidence in the Lori Vallow case. Of course, we've been here before. In the JonBenet Ramsey case and in the Amanda Knox case, we've also seen partial DNA matches. But we should know that as significant as the hair or DNA evidence is in this case, by the way, there's also hair evidence in the Casey Anthony case. Although you have evidence like that, it should never be seen in isolation, but as yet another aspect in a vast tapestry of circumstantial evidence woven by the prosecution across 15 separate trial days. It's one of the bricks that is used to build their case. It's not the only brick. One shouldn't only look at that brick. One should look at that brick as part of the secure foundation or the secure structure upon which the entire case is based. In other words, the Lori Vallow case doesn't and won't and shouldn't come down to a single shred of not quite definitive evidence. We need to see the evidence in context. We need to see it within the totality of evidence. We also need to see it within the time frame. And that is something we'll deal with in a moment. Those GPS pings and data points from Alex Cox's phone. In true crime, we are always looking for the sensational, simple answer, the bombshell breakthrough, that one thing that sinks someone's fate. But the reality tends to be less simple and more complex than we'd like, and that is why court cases tend to be arduous. It involves a heck of a lot of information, a lot of detail, a lot of subtlety, and then you put all of that together, and then eventually, after a long period of time, your case starts coming together. this is also the reason why former suspects in the Ramsey case and also the Knox case shouldn't actually be allowed to claim that a partial match to DNA that couldn't be 100% matched to them isn't proof of innocence. So I don't think you can say if DNA match doesn't 100% match, DNA profile doesn't 100% match them, then that is then proof of innocence. Rather, it's insufficient proof of guilt, and there is a difference. Interestingly enough, the same lab that did DNA tests in the Ramsey case was used in this case, and that is Bode Technology. If we go to KTVB7, there's a reference to Bode Technology, where the DA analyst, Keely Coleman, was called to the stand. Bode Technology received the evidence from police in May of 2022, which is not really that long ago, basically a year ago, basically just less than a year ago. Coleman, so it's fairly recent evidence. Coleman had 3 DNA profiles, one from Laurie Vallow, one from Melanie Gibb, and another from Tylee Ryan. So they were basically trying to explain what was a longish blonde hair doing in this duct tape. Could Melanie Gibb have left it? Could Tylee Ryan have left it? Right? And according to Coleman, she also received a piece of hair from an adhesive. The hair sample matched Laurie Vallow, Coleman said. The sample Coleman received was, according to her, a partial sample with missing alleles. Bear in mind, it's 2 aspects to a piece of evidence, not just one. It's a hair. What color is it? What length is it? Right? And then also, is there something in that hair, like the root of it, with some DNA on it? And so those 2 things together can be actually quite compelling. According to Coleman, the probability of randomly selecting a random individual in relation to the DNA profile is 1 in 71 billion. In other words, it's very likely to be Laurie Vallow. Equally, very unlikely to be anybody else. 1 in 71 billion, bear in mind there are just 8 billion people on Earth. If we assume that the hair was Laurie's and that there isn't an innocent explanation for why her hair is there, for example, perhaps she was wrapping a birthday gift or doing some sort of home maintenance with duct tape or packaging items to go into storage. If that's not why her hair is there, then we have to wonder if it's there because Laurie was actively participating. Was she actively wrapping her 7-year-old adopted son's body in tape? That's the question here. What do you think? Perhaps if she was doing this, she was doing it with Alex Cox. Perhaps they were doing it together. If so, is that where Laurie was when David Warwick had his nightmare and Melanie Gibb summoned Laurie, remember it was in the night, only to knock onto a closed, locked door and receive no answer? Where was Laurie at that moment? What was she doing at that moment? Now, when I was in Boise covering this case, I felt like law enforcement and I suppose you could also argue the prosecution needed to stress more explicitly and simply where Alex Cox's phone went. So in other words, on what day and how long did it spend wherever it went? Well, it appears on trial day 15, they did exactly that. So according to this article on KTVB7, quote, Alex Cox spent 17 minutes on Chad Daybell's property when JJ was presumed to have been killed and then buried there. Right, so we're dealing with the events of, I think, the 23rd of September. And so this raises the question, did Alex Cox bury JJ or did Chad prepare the spot in advance? Because 17 minutes doesn't seem enough time to excavate a grave from scratch, unless, of course, the pair work together. Going back to the article, quote, Wright said that the day after JJ was last seen, Alex Cox's device went back and forth between his apartment and Laurie Vallow's apartment. So in that sense, You got JJ in a grave. You got Alex at the grave site, and then where does Alex come from? Well, Laurie's apartment. And so isn't that showing a connection? Isn't that showing something going on with Laurie that Laurie should have known about? Because you have the exact same pattern repeating itself on September 23rd. Cox's device travels to Chad Daybell's home, right? And arrives at around 9:55 a.m., right? That is in terms of Tylee, right? Tylee died on about the 9th, JJ on the 23rd. And so the device shows the location as being a pond, near a pond area, which is close to where where JJ Vallow was buried. On September 9th, we see a similar movement pattern from Cox's device, right, as what happened on the 23rd. It goes back to his apartment and then leaves around 9 a.m. It's tracked to Chad Daybell's residence. The device arrives around 15 minutes later. I've driven from the apartment area to the Daybell property, and it is about a 15-minute drive if you drive straight there. His device is tracked behind the house. It moves northwest towards the gate on the property and is behind the residence again at around 10:57 a.m. There is a gate on the property. Besides the driveway area, there's a gate to the side. And so it seems like he drove into that area. Again, if you drive there, you can see that there's a separate gate. It says private property on it. And then 10 minutes later, at 11:55 a.m., Chad texts his wife the story about the raccoon. And I do think that if there's a boo-boo from Laurie, Chad, or Alex, I think this is possibly one of the biggest boo-boos of all. This text from Chad giving away time and date and this whole idea of where you possibly need to look inside a pet cemetery and then look at what happened. I mean, if they didn't have that clue, what would law enforcement have been able to do? What would they have been able to prove? The other thing is, one has a sense that the burning process was too brief to achieve what they intended. In any event, I'm not going to take it further than that. In my next analysis, I'll deal with Tammy Daybell's cause of death and the crucial classic evidence that can be used to determine with confidence whether it's asphyxia, whether that occurred or not. I wonder if any of you know what I'm referring to. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.
What makes you tick? Being a good mom is very important to me, and a good wife, and a good worker, and being all those things together is not easy. So I'm basically a ticking time bomb.